Hi, good day everyone. This is Mother Rivera Monsada, and in this video, I am gonna talk about feedback in assessing writing. But before that, let us read these two situations. First is about the student having an issue or problem about his works or her works, and second about a professor having an issue or problem about his learners' works. So, Yvonne is frustrated. She wants to do well in her language arts class, but each essay she completes fails to earn her the grade she believes she deserves. Although her teacher thoughtfully writes out corrective comments on her essays, the Yvonne they seem to run together, forming a nonsensical sea of red ink. With each assignment, she feels less capable and grows more resentful of her instructor. So, let's proceed to the second one. Professor Collier is frustrated. He has been teaching language arts for well over 2 decades. He is thoroughly convinced of the importance of developing good writing skills and spends countless hours poring over student submissions, making numerous editorial comments in an effort to encourage them to develop as writers. Sadly, he finds that many of the students he teaches focus only on the final grade, and express little interest in revising their work. So, what have you noticed to Yvonne's and Professor Collier's problem? Do you think in the case of Yvonne, do you think Yvonne's teacher have provided her an effective feedback to her work? How about Professor Collier? What could be the cause to his problem? Do you think he was able to provide a good and effective feedback to his students or learners' work? Do you believe that feedback really has an impact to the learners? Okay, I know some of you or some of us can relate to Yvonne. That feeling of embarrassment, or that feeling of you feel like you are just less capable of doing anything because of the feedback you have received. For example, you have received your work or paperwork from your teacher, and you have noticed your paper, it has red markings, a lot of red markings on it. It will feel you like it will make you feel like, oh, I'm not good at this. I think I cannot do it, just because of those feedback you have reserved. So no, in Yvonne's situation, you can see that responding to writing is quite challenging or tricky, because writing is vulnerable, meaning people have an emotional connection to their work, to the words they put on paper. So if you do not carefully give good feedback, or critically put good feedback on your learner's work, it could possibly hurt their feelings, and more so lose their motivation to do their works. Okay, so the way teachers provide feedbacks on students' writing directly impacts their internal dialogue and self-perception. None of us approach grading essays with the intentions of making the student feel bad, but we also know when it has inadvertently happened. The problem comes in when English teachers have 150 papers to grade at a time. It can be easily to fall into the trap of commenting quickly to get through the massive stuff faster, understandable on many levels. What that means, though, is that we might not be putting the amount of thought into our feedback that we need to, in terms of being sensitive to how students will perceive it. So no, that's true. When we have a lot of works, or stack of pile of works to do or to be done, we tend to just scan or read it without without internalizing, without reading it or putting it on our mind, and giving a feedback that is sensitive to the learner's emotional impact. And we tend to just giving a quick feedback just to end the paperworks we need to check. So now the question is, as a teacher or as a pre-service teacher, how are we going to give effective feedback in assessing learners' writing? We have here 10, and first is narrow the focus. When responding to writing, we need to think about what we really want our students to know. We can't comment on everything because students won't learn all the things like we hope they will. Instead, we can provide fewer comments that are meaningful suggestions, worded in a way that are sensitive to the student perceptions. Here is an example. If a student essay is full of spelling errors, it's not necessary to circle every word, although although it was tempting to do so. Why not just write, please check the spelling throughout the essay, or please ask a parent help you spell check. This kind of feedback gives a more positive impact to your learners, because aside of you won't hurt his or her feelings, you are also giving a more optimistic way of giving a feedback about his spelling errors. And this type of comments or feedback is more positive, and it seems like less of a CCPN task. When we say CCPN task, it is a task that is impossible to complete. Second is ask question instead of making statements. Why? Why do you think asking question is better than making statements? Okay, this is the answer. Research shows that asking question is more beneficial to learning than making statements, because asking questions push people to figure out answers on their own. In terms of wanting to influence students' self-talk in a positive way, consider the following. We have here an example. Maybe you noticed a student's essay is wrote with run-ons. When you say run-ons, this is two independent clause that comes together without the use of proper punctuation and good conjunction. For example, you noticed your student essay have a lot of run-ons. Instead of making a statement just like there are run-ons in every paragraph, proofread more carefully. You can just ask, or you can just write a feedback asking where might you insert end marks to help the audience follow your line of thinking more easily. Please review the notes on sentence errors and then make some revisions. Okay, by doing this, you are allowing your students to reflect or to make an answer to a question about his or her work. So third is to confer with students. It's a lot easier to word suggestion in positive manner if you are speaking with the student. In writing, it's more difficult to infer tone, and it's easier to write something that is brushed than it is speak it. Talking with students is one way to get to know them better as writers and as the people. Students need to feel genuine relationship with their teacher in order to really be vulnerable and accept suggestion for improvement. Plus, conferring with students means we spend less time grading a mountain of papers, and during conferring, we can offer a word suggestion kindly to build students' optimistic self-talk. Yes, this is true. When we are having a one-on-one conversation, with our learners about their works. We can explain, or we can spoke out, or we can tell her or him the strength or the weaknesses of their works without having a misinterpretation about the feedback we have write or we have wrote in their papers, because sometimes the feedback we have given to them written on their works may sometimes be misinterpreted, because in giving the feedback in wrote in paper is very difficult to infer of what is our feeling about their work. Maybe we are happy about them or their work, or we're upset of what they have right. So it's better to just confer, to have a conversation or converse with them one-on-one or personally. So now let's have the fourth one, and consider the tone of our comments. Some of the positive ones were nicely written, well supported, excellent topic sentence, insightful point, great evidence provided, good intro, good sentence, good use of vocab, love your voice, I love this point. So the best way to keep someone pursuing a challenge is to encourage them. It is not so hard to find anything that merits a pat on the back. Yes, this is true. And giving a positive comments, like this, like of those example, will motivate your student on their writing. So it will give them a motivation. I remember when I was in senior high school, I have this one teacher that when she is having a test or giving us a task about write-ups, I am looking forward about her feedback, because it's very nice to the feeling when I have received a positive comment about my work, and it really motivates me to do my best to be better of writing. So I'm very grateful to her. Thanks you, Ma'am Aisel. Now let's move forward to the fifth one. Use a 1-to-1 ratio. Students will be more receptive to constructive feedback when it's balanced with praise. Point out students' strengths. Tell them what they did well. If you can find enough strengths in their writing, it's probably a good idea just to help them develop one goal to work on improvement. Anything else would be overwhelming, and it might make them feel incapable. Plus, how many things can a student work on improving at the same time and truly master? A 1-to-1 ratio is a good goal to begin with if you are not used to balancing feedback. Begin with the positive. So now it is really important to just not focus on the negative side or negative. You're giving learners a negative feedback of your work, because it will most likely unmotivate them when you are only just giving a negative feedback. So it's important to, when you are giving every feedback, it's important that it's balanced. You are giving the weakness of his work, and also the strength or the positive of your learners' output. So now let's proceed to the sixth one. Just read. The answer to the question of how to respond to student writing may be much more simple than it seems. The first time you look at the student's essay, just read it. Take time to reflect on what you read before making any comments. This strategy will help you to write only the things that matter most and reduce time nitpicking every error. Sometimes when we're responding to writing, our impulse is to point out every imperfection, but that doesn't help the student or us as a teachers. Just put away the pen for the first reading and then balance positive and constructive feedback as you note the most important goals for each student. So no, that's right. So when we are assessing our learners' work or write-ups, let us just first read it. No, kasi when we are reading or when we are assessing our learners' work, we tend to just pick out the mistakes and just easily giving a feedback from that mistake, and doing that by doing that we will miss out the most important thing giving feedback, and that is to have to be sensitive on our students' feeling, and we tend to miss out the good ones or the positive or the strength of our learners because we are only focusing to the mistakes of the work of our learners. So it is important to just leave your pens away and just first read the output, and that is when you can give a constructive feedback from it. So the 7th is ask students to reflect. How would you ask your students to reflect? We will find out. One important step in helping students improve their internal dialogue is allowing them to find their own mistakes. It's true, students won't find everything you will, but when we provide them with a rubric we have carefully explained and referenced in advance, they should be able to pinpoint areas where they can grow. Understanding how students view the writing will help us in 2 ways. First is we will be aware of what students think their strengths and weaknesses are. In this way, if they think their ideas are excellent, we know that we need to have a conversation with them about how content can be improved rather than writing feedback in the margins and giving them unsatisfactory rating for that component. And second, it prepares students to accept help. If they know the writing isn't perfect, they will be less likely to negatively internalize suggestions for improvement. Yes, it is important also that if we are going to ask or task our learners to make, for example, a position paper, a reflection, it is always to give them or provide them with a rubric, because it will help them realize what areas they have to develop, what areas is their strength, are their strength, and what areas they need to focus on. From that rubric, we are allowing them to have a self-assessment or have a self-reflection. So that's it. Now let's move on to the 8th one. It's easy to rush through grading papers and leave vague comments like awkward or confusing. Yet those comments don't help students, and they typically are not internalized positively. A more helpful approach, instead of doing so, is to leave kind and specific suggestion. For example, can you clarify this argument? I'm not sure what you mean here. Or is the hot dog driving the car? Try rewording the sentence to clarify. Even when we are leaving good feedback, it helps to be specific. Rather than good or love this, try writing this sentence really emphasizes the importance of the research, or this transition is so helpful for readers to follow your line of thinking. So in giving feedback, let us put in our mind that we should always be specific on telling them or writing a feedback on what areas of a learner is need to be focused on. Now let's proceed to the next one, or to the second to the last one. Clarify the audience's view. Instead of pointing out what writer did wrong, focus on what might confuse readers. For instance, will the audience be confused about how their hook relates to the thesis? You could ask, what is the connection between the hook and the thesis? Can you help readers understand how they relate in the bridge? Another example also might be if a student only recites direct quotes in the essay and does not paraphrase research. You could write, how many of the sentences in this paragraph are in your own wording? How might you revise so that the audience will be able to hear your voice coming through? Focusing on what the readers need instead of what the writer did wrong is another way we can be sensitive to students' internal dialogue. So now let's move on to the last one, to help students understand themselves. What we stress in our feedback shows how students view their writing abilities. It's important that our feedback leads to students to a point where they can see their own strengths and weaknesses. Pointing out patterns can be useful because students are not usually able to observe this pattern about themselves. To illustrate, maybe a student is a talented writer, but he or she is consistently verbose. When I say verbose, it is the excessively use of words than what is needed. In this case, we can show students these areas for growth through our feedback. How? We can say, I love how you take time to select words that are meaningful and precise. I can tell you that you put a lot of time and effort into writing sentences that are mature. I'm proud of you. Here is one area forgot I'd like you to consider. How can you maintain your personal style in your impressive word choice while also being more concise so that your readers can follow along easier? Okay, so we have learned now that giving feedback is tricky. It's difficult because it can hurt or it can negatively impact the internal dialogue of a learner. So as an English teacher, it's our responsibility to carefully assess the writing through giving them an effective feedback, because as I said, it can affect their internal dialogue, and it will also affect their motivation to develop their writing skills as a macro skills. And also in giving a feedback, it is not necessary that by time to time when we are giving feedback, it should be always graded, because it will most likely put a pressure on a learner. So instead of focusing on how to work on how to develop, he or she might end up focusing or writing his works without considering or without thinking how he or she can improve his work, because he or she will most likely focus on pursuing a grade. That's it. So that is the end of my report. I hope everyone have understood. So if you have any questions or clarifications, you are very welcome to ask me personally when we met in school, or just send me a private message. That's it. Goodbye and Have a blissful day, everyone.